for life.
There we go.
That more better?
I was like, what is it doing?
Me and technology, we agree to disagree. All right, as I was going to say, thanks, Laura. 77 degrees on the outside right now in downtown Comanche. Time for Coffee Talk, brought to you by Comanche Chamber of Commerce and Agriculture. Check them out at #Explore Comanche, Texas, as we welcome in Cynthia Newton with Hope Counseling here in Brownwood. Good morning, Cynthia.
I'm not in Brownwood, I'm in Comanche, but good morning.
I did say Brownwood, didn't I? I don't know where I'm at. I told you, me and technology gets me all flustered.
It's going to be one of those days.
Yes, ma'am.
So if y'all remember last week, I said, this is going to be a tough topic today, but one that was actually specifically requested by a listener, and thank you for that, guys. I really appreciate your input on things that you'd like to hear me talk about, because this isn't for me. I can talk all day, every day, but my goal is to reach people and to help you through whatever's going on, or to help you understand more about mental health. I mean, that was the concept of doing this to begin with, and
Right.
That's why I'm here. So today we're actually going to talk about suicide. One of those taboo subjects that people don't like to talk about that affects so many people around us. So it's going to be a little down, and I'm sorry, but I think that, especially for those that have been affected by suicide in some form or fashion, that this is really going to help you. For those who haven't, it may help you to take a little bit closer look around the people that are around you. So not only are we going to talk about suicide itself, but we're also going to talk about prevention. And those go hand in hand. So we can't always prevent or remove suffering and pain, but we can cultivate hope and support resiliency by learning more about suicide and how to help those we care about to find their reasons for living. We're also going to learn about warning signs that might indicate someone is thinking about suicide, what you can do if you are concerned about someone, and what you can do if you're concerned. That's what I just said. What you can do if you are concerned about somebody. Sorry. It is Monday. I apologize. So most of us, as I just said, have been or will be impacted by suicide at some point in our lives. So I want you to think about 4 questions. Is suicide preventable? How do I know someone might be suicidal? What can I do to help if I am concerned about someone? And what resources are available to support someone in crisis? How do I cope with loss after suicide? So we're going to start with suicide prevention in terms. Often you hear terms and phrases when talking about suicide that are actually not really appropriate. We use, and they can actually have a significant impact on the way the message is received. They can either encourage someone, or they can push people further from the support that they need. The most common phrase we use when someone has died by suicide is they committed suicide.
Right.
It's recommended to avoid this term because it is most often associated with criminal action. Framing suicide this way can bring about feelings of shame, guilt, or stigma that can be hurtful to loss survivors, or inadvertently reinforce a negative bias, preventing people from reaching out for help. These actions should be referred to clearly as a death by suicide or an attempted suicide. One reason, this doesn't make, it's okay, that makes it better. It just makes it come across a little better. Again, especially if you're suffering from that loss from suicide, you don't want your loved one everybody to perceive that they've created a crime or done this major crime, and that perception is definitely how it can come across. One recent study explored that this terminology and found that among respondents that the things that they preferred to hear were that they took their own life, died by suicide, and attempted suicide received the highest consistent marks for acceptability. So just be aware of that. If you sit there and you're talking or you're listening, or you maybe know about somebody that has, just kind of be aware of that terminology. What are some things that you have heard or thought causes suicide? Just take a look around you. All these things that people say cause suicide. And reality is the causes of suicide are actually a lot more complex than we realize. It's not caused by any one factor. We know that most people who experience these situations and conditions do not die by suicide. Okay? Attributing the cause of suicide to any single factor can also signal that a suicidal person to that factor is normal, which might discourage people from seeking help for themselves or someone else. So just remember that they don't die by suicide. So there's not a true cause of suicide. There's a lot more underlying that led to somebody killing themselves. Historically, and even today, suicide carries a lot of stigma, prejudice, fear. Again, it's that taboo subject we don't want to talk about. People who are thinking about suicide may be hesitant or afraid to tell someone about their thoughts or reach out for help for fear of what others will think, worry about how it will affect their family and relationships, or even their employment. Some may doubt that anything can be done to help them, so why bother? Sometimes people thinking about suicide already feel like a burden to their loved ones and don't speak up about out of worry of becoming even more of a burden. However, we can reduce the stigma, fear, and prejudice around suicide, increasing our knowledge and educating others, trying to understand and respect the pain that someone who is having thoughts of suicide is experiencing, and feeling more confident to talk directly about suicide with someone we are concerned about will help with all of this. So, on a personal level, what can you do? Know the warning signs of suicide. Be willing to ask someone you're concerned about directly if they are thinking about suicide. Learn the elements of a safety plan and how it can help you keep someone you are concerned about safe. Know the resources for support, from crisis line to professional providers. These are important to be aware of. And you also want to make sure you relate to an individual's immediate state, meaning where they are right now, okay? Not where they were, not where they're going, where they are right now. Is going to help you understand and help you help somebody that's showing warning signs at this moment in time. Often you're seeing a cluster of signs that most strongly, maybe signal the risk rather than only one or two warning signs. So although much of the attention in suicide prevention is paid to warning signs and risk factors for suicide, it is equally or even more important to consider the strength of protective factors against suicide. So think about things like access to effective behavioral health care, connectedness to individuals, families, community, and social institutions, life skills, including problem-solving skills and coping skills, ability to adapt to change, self-esteem, and a sense of purpose or meaning in life. And when you look at where we are, culture, religious, or personal beliefs that discourage suicide. So when you look at where we are, I know that I have a lot of people that look up on Facebook that aren't necessarily from this immediate area that I'm in, but where we are in this particular area, we're in a very rural area. Right. And it, in itself, access to help is not as readily available as it might be in an urban area, or like the Metroplex or Houston or places of that, because there's so many more resources. That doesn't mean it's not there, but it just means that we have to be more aware that sometimes there's a lot more people suffering or needing help that can't get it because that access is much more difficult. It's not, okay, I can just jump on a bus and get transported someplace to get some help, because there's not very many bus systems. It's the rural transit system, if it's available. And again, I mean, it's not available 24 hours a day. So things like that, or, taxis don't really exist. Right. Uber doesn't really exist in this area. So, I mean, just be aware that access may not always be what's out there, but the ability to transport oneself to get that care.
Sure.
So, excuse me. If any of the critical warning signs are present, it's important to always call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. We will put this on our Facebook page. I'm going to ask that the Ox also post this on their Facebook page today as well, so that you have this number. It's 1-800-273-8255. That is the Suicide Prevention Lifeline that is set up for people that are specifically looking at suicide. And this should be called if they're threatening to hurt or kill oneself, or talking of wanting to hurt or kill oneself, making plans for suicide, or looking for ways to kill oneself, such as purchasing a gun, stockpiling pills, posting social media, or writing about death, dying, or suicide when these actions are out of the ordinary for this person. They're especially concerning when the behavior is new. Okay, it's increased or seems related to a painful event or loss or change. So that might include the loss of a job, the loss of a spouse, the loss of a loved one. So some of that may come into factor. So what can you do? I mean, I'm sitting here talking about this. What can you do? First off, if you sense something is wrong, don't delay in getting help. The first step is to find the words to have a conversation with someone you are concerned about. During the conversation, express your concern and mention specific things you have noticed that have caused your concern. Ask them directly. Don't be afraid to ask them directly. Are you thinking about suicide, or are you thinking about killing yourself? Don't be afraid of that. Sometimes it takes that an abrupt question for somebody to finally say, yes, I need help. Starting the conversation may seem intimidating, but it's important to remember that usually when someone is having thoughts of suicide, they are looking for an opportunity to talk about it. Remember, you aren't expected to have all the answers. You're simply trying to create the space to have an open conversation about suicide. Start by expressing your concern, mention specific things that you have noticed, let them know you care about them and you want to help. So, to prepare for this conversation, if you know that you're going to be having this conversation, what can you do? Take a deep breath. Taking a deep breath. That's always a great start. It helps you get at ease, helps you kind of restore your thinking, create a safe and calm environment. Don't take them to Chuck E. Cheese. Okay? That might be somewhat safe for kids, but it's not a calm environment. Okay? So just be aware that it needs to be in a calm environment. Give yourself plenty of time so the conversation won't feel rushed. Don't be constantly sitting there looking at your watch, you know, distracted by things going on around you. Be prepared with resources to share with them and how you will respond to the direct question of whether they are thinking about suicide. Listen more than you talk. You don't always have to talk, okay? It's not about that. You don't have to have all the answers. Nobody expects you to. You're likely not a mental health professional, so you may not have all the answers, okay? Make sure you have your own supports in place to help you debrief and de-stress. Self-care is vital to being able to effectively care for others. So taking on something like this and approaching somebody that you love or are concerned about, you also need to make sure that you have an outlet to go to as well. When you ask the person if they're thinking about suicide, they may say no. Continue to encourage them to talk about how they are feeling, support their coping and resiliency, encourage them to reach out to resources, such as the Suicide Prevention Line, Lifeline, or other resources that can offer tools for coping and support. Remind them that you are there for them. Listen without lecturing or judgment. Be vigilant about behaviors you're noticing and continue to check in with them on a regular basis. If they say yes, take it seriously, but remain calm. Remain calm. Remember that just being present with them is helping to reduce their risk and keeping them safe. Thank them for their honesty and openness. Encourage them to talk about the reasons they feel this way and listen. Truly listening is the important action you can take. Explore and see if you can help them identify some reasons for living. Encourage them to reach out for help. Let them know you'll support them and offer to make the call with them. If they say yes, you stay with them until you get help. You offer to say, hey, let's get some help out here. Let's call a crisis line. Let's call somebody. Because if they say yes, that right there means you don't want to walk away until you've got somebody there that's a professional to be able to help them. So, having a list of resources available, the phone numbers, before you have the conversation, not only to share with the person you're concerned about, but to support your confidence and to know that you're not alone. So I gave a phone number, the National Suicide Prevention. There's also one for teens, okay? So that number, and again, I'm going to give these to the aux, and we'll post these on our Facebook page at Hope Counseling of Texas, is you call 310-855-4673 or text TEEN. We know that our kiddos love to text, so they can text TEEN to 839-863. So again, these numbers will be posted for y'all to be able to access. How do we raise resilient kids? Foster positive connections, promote healthy emotional skills, encourage basic health actions. Ask yourself these questions. Has your child lost interest in things? Are they having dramatic mood changes? Have you noticed them getting more angry, agitated, or irritable? Are they engaging in risky behavior? Have they given away belongings? What are we looking for? What we're looking for is changes in behaviors, especially ones that we discussed earlier when talking about warning signs, especially when they are related to a recent life stressor or loss change. So pain isn't always obvious. When you should worry is when you see mood changes that can be part of the youth, mood changes that are more significant than your normal youth experience. That's kind of hard to understand, but they're, more significant, heightened mood changes. It's important to stay vigilant for warning signs that your child is more than moody. Due to current events, our communities are impacted by additional mental health stressors and challenges, so we need to realize that. So, guys, there's so much that I can sit here and talk about in such a little amount of time. But one of the things that is near and dear is not only prevention, but also being aware of how do you take care of yourself after you've lost somebody to suicide. And that's a whole nother topic in itself, and what you do and how you cope. It's a traumatic loss. It's not something, you know, it's similarly, you can compare that to an instant death by a car accident or something of that nature. A traumatic loss that you're not able to prepare for is devastating in itself. We also see what we call mirroring or mimicking, and often in your schools, when one kid complete suicide, you're going to see more suicides happen after that. That is very common, unfortunately, because it's like it gives an okay for somebody to do it, so anybody else that might be thinking about it may be heightened at a chance to, you know, it's like, okay, well, they did it, so I can do it. So be aware of your kids, be aware of, you know, your surroundings, be aware of how it's impacting you and your children when there is a suicide, because that definitely can bring more emotions and more feelings to the surface, and you want to make sure and get them the help. And you may not think that they need help. They may shut down. They may not want to talk about it, but that may be a sign in itself that, hey, you know, maybe they need to talk to somebody that's not that close to them. So just be sure and get them the help that they need through counseling or a mental health center or something like that. You know, and it may just be, hey, you know, I just want to take you to meet somebody, just talk to them one time about everything that's going on, and then let them decide from there. If they need more help than that, you know, okay. If they don't, or if you don't, you know, just that one time. Typically, if they're able to go for one session and they're really needing that help, once you can get them in the door, that paves the way to get them the help that they need. Right. So don't put the cliche of it's mental health, it's counseling, it's whatever. Just make sure that they're aware that you're there to help them. Or you're trying to get them help, especially if they've had a friend die or a loved one die from suicide. So, as always, guys, I know this is a hard topic today, and I know that many of you are probably sitting there going, you know, this affects me in a lot of ways, and maybe you didn't answer all my questions, and that's okay. You know, you can always reach out to us at Hope Counseling of Texas via Facebook or at our office at 325-356-1105. And we do have 4 office locations in Comanche, Hamilton, Eastland, and Dublin, and we're here for y'all. So please, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out to Hope Counseling of Texas through Facebook or calling our office directly. Thank y'all for your time. I will be out for the next couple of weeks on the radio, but I do have some wonderful people stepping in to cover. So again, if you have any specific topics, please let us know so we can make sure that we're addressing any concerns that you have.
All right, Cynthia Newton, thanks for discussing, as you said, a tough subject to discuss.
Unemployment, the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's headlines can be.